And so he brings up the alarm. The alarm comes through with the camera feed, starts the camera feed, and he's like, oh my God, look at this. And I lean over, and Simon comes over, and he looks over, and on the video from the alarm coming through, we see two guys in, like, the whatever, the ski masks with the holes cut out. They are breaking in through the front door of this office for this recycling place. They're then going into the back room where they obviously knew where something was, and then they have sledgehammers, and they start going at the safe that's held under the desk with these sledgehammers, trying to get the safe open to get out whatever's inside. We can assume.
I'm Jeremy Vance, and this is the FAQing Security Podcast.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to the FAQing Security Podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy. Today will be just a solo podcast, and this is our second episode of our first season, which is kind of a cool new thing that we're doing. So that'll be good. I'm proud of this. Now, today we'll be going through and hitting three main questions. So the first question we'll talk about is what is a password manager and why you should be using a password manager instead of trying to remember all your passwords yourself. The second one is for security systems and your PIN numbers and how safe are your PIN numbers and do they actually do what you want them to do. And then the last one is going to be, it's come up as a question for me, being, have you ever caught a burglar? So we'll take this from the point of view of back when I was working in monitoring and doing monitoring center work, so we can answer that question as well. So we'll go ahead and get started, and hopefully everybody will enjoy it. If you obviously have ideas for how things can get better, because this is a brand new project for me, or if you just want to subscribe and support, all of that is greatly appreciated. Of course, if you want to send this to somebody, or just send it to one person that you think would find it useful, that'll help a ton as well too. All right. Okay, let's go ahead and start with what is a password manager and why do you need one? So computers and cybersecurity have kind of started leaping, right? So we're no longer in a situation to where your normal passwords that you would use 20 years ago are still safe in this day and age. There's a whole big thing if you look back at the history where we were like, all right, we need you to have a password now. And everybody was like, okay, my password is 12345 or the word password. And then we went, okay, well that's okay, but people now know what are the most commonly used passwords and people are able to guess them. So let's go ahead and add a number. And people went, okay, my password is now password 1, right? And so we went for a little while with that, and then we were like, all right, well, people have figured out what the common passwords are now. You have to use a special character. And they went, okay, my password is password 1 exclamation mark. And we've kind of gone and grown from that point in time now. So last year, I was pushing a lot of passphrases and passkeys for both my stuff and also my clients. Obviously, my organizations, we use a password manager to kind of organize all that. And that's kind of what we want to talk about here is why a password manager is important for keeping you safe. So there's a few people that'll be listening to this that'll know what a password manager is, and that's cool. You're doing the right thing, right? That's what we want. Whether you're using, NordPass or Proton KeyPass or even KeyPass or LastPass, it doesn't matter. Like, as long as you're using one, that's the kind of thing. The people that I want to kind of reach out to now, so if this sounds like you, is you go, oh, I don't need a password manager because ... right? I can remember my password, which means you're sharing passwords, right? Which you have the same password in multiple things, which is bad, right? You could be to an extent of being like, oh, I don't have to worry about it because I wrote it on a Post-it note. It's sitting on my computer. I don't have to worry about it because I keep it in an Excel sheet. All these are actually things that are unsafe. So we want to move away from that. And password managers allow us to do this. So instead of having to remember every single passwords and have multiples that kind of share things, what we can do is we can use a password manager. And for all intents and purposes, I'm going to be talking about NordPass So if we're using NordPass, you can use the free version of NordPass. It doesn't even cost you anything to store all of your passwords within a safe, secure environment in which that you can then have one thing that you can get into, and then you can actually then take your passwords and put them in where you need to use them. Now, if you pay for NordPass or any of the other password managers, you get a bunch of other stuff with them. So we're talking about things that like check to make sure your passwords haven't been captured and used on the dark web or things like that, like to the point to where they run similar to how you manually would check have I been pwned, which is a website, which if you don't know, go check out have I been pwned. You put your email address in, it'll tell you if you've been hacked and put out there. So the password manager takes care of all that. Now, there's a few reasons why this is important. First thing is you can use as complicated of a password as you want without having to try to remember the password. So in a lot of cases, again, NordPass being the one that we're kind of talking about now, you can actually have it generate the password for what you're using. It'll basically just copy and paste from that directly into what you're using. You don't even need to know the password because it's in the password manager that you have securely access to. The other thing that's kind of important there is in a lot of cases, it's auto-filling from the password manager. So it means that you're not actually typing the thing. Now, whether or not you feel that you're important enough for somebody to install a keylogger on your computer or somewhere in your computing ecosystem, it happens, right? And basically, if you sit there and you type out your password every single time, it's going to have multiple hits of this password going through, and they're going to actually be able to see this is the thing that they're typing over and over again. We remove that completely. So all these little kind of holes, the password manager takes out of there. Now, the big thing that I run into is people are scared to start using a password manager because there is a bit of setup with it, and especially if you've not used one before, it's an unfamiliar situation. So obviously, if you are scared or you're having problems, reach out to either myself or any security professional, and we'll be able to help you out with that. It is an important thing for you to take the time. So whether you're just not super tech savvy or you've just never used one, it's not too hard once you get going. Like everything else, same thing with cell phones and all technology. Once you actually do it and you get it set up and it's kind of running in the background, it just runs. So it's important that you find somebody to help you with that if you're having trouble with it. What we don't want is people to be vulnerable, especially people who are maybe not the most tech savvy people, because their passwords are being floated around everywhere. NordPass in particular, again, has a great free version of it. I'm not sponsored by them. This is just the one that I'm using at the moment. So they're basically, the free version is great. The paid version is super cheap. It's like in American, it's like $1 something a month or something like that. And then it takes care of all your stuff. It'll even actually take care of the autofill on websites that you're paying. So like your Amazons and eBays and things like that. So I can't stress that enough. If you have more questions about password managers, DM me, message me. We'll get you some answers and some help. But that's probably one of the things that we see a lot where we go into a site, we're working with a client and we go, okay, what's your password for this? And they go, oh, it's on the sticky note on the monitor, or, oh, it's just using a PIN number and you can get in there. We want to remove that, right? We want to just remove the low-hanging fruit that any sort of nefarious person that sees that information could try to take and use. So yeah, that answers the first question. Okay, before we go on to the next question, I want to take a few seconds to say thank you to this episode's sponsor. This week it's Ella Hall. Now, everybody knows how much I love local businesses and building stuff together, and specifically leaders and builders who personify positivity. And Ella does just that. Running a business demands so much. But what if you could lead with more power and more confidence and do it effortlessly? Ella Hall, who I can honestly tell you is my friend, can show you how. I've known Ella for a long time, and I'm constantly inspired by her work. She's an intuitive self-mastery coach and a pleasure expert who helps us reclaim our personal power and achieve extraordinary results. She's the creator of the Platinum Method and has over 20 years of experience. Ella helps you shift from the hustle to flow, so you can create the business and life you truly deserve. And this isn't just for 40-year-old white guys like me. Ella has an entire community dedicated to building and empowering women so they can do more and be more. It's funny because if you would have asked me 15 years ago if I'd ever need coaching or want coaching, I would have literally just laughed at you. But the truth is, when we get to doing the hard stuff, sometimes we need someone to keep an eye on us and help us find the right path. Now, with everything going on in my life, having someone that can cut through all the noise and connect with me to find what I truly need to push forward is priceless. There's a reason why every top athlete has a coach. Now, Ella's offering a free 20-minute clarity breakthrough call valued at over $300 just for our listeners and viewers. I see you, YouTubers. Book your call today at ellahall.com.au. That's ELLAHALL.com.au. And mention that you heard about her from the podcast. And remember, when you support local businesses, you make Australia safer. When you support our sponsors, you allow me to make the show better. And we do that together. All right. The next question is very similar, so I've kind of grouped these two together. So that was your password management for your digital life. So your passwords, your credit card numbers, all that stuff that you use on a computer. Now for your physical systems. So we're talking about your security systems for your home, your businesses. If you use access control systems and you're using PIN numbers, anywhere where you're using a PIN number to access a building securely. Now, we can build in some safety stuff in the background, things like from the monitoring side, we can talk about things like, oh, if somebody disarms your site outside of these hours, it could set off an alert. But what that means is somebody already has your PIN numbers, right? So that's a very slow process compared to somebody actually reacting to somebody breaking in. We're trying to verify that this person's active instead of being like, oh, this is an actual intruder. So PIN numbers for security systems are really popular for the last 50 years, right? Because it's basically been the only way. Now we are moving from a PIN number architecture on security systems to a mobile first architecture on security systems, which is a simpler version of biometrics because your phone is literally attached to your body. Like for all intents and purposes, we're all cyborgs. Like I can't live without my phone, and I guarantee you probably can't live without your phone. For all intents and purposes, you're a cyborg. Your phone is part of who you are. So we can kind of leverage that to create very secure environments using your phones now. So whether it's access to doors, arming or disarming systems, you're basically having to go through multiple factor authentication to get into your phone, whether it's your face scan or your PIN number, and then you go into an app which has a different PIN number or a biometric like your thumb. We can make it very secure and personalized to you. And that allows you to easily go in and do stuff. So if you want to disarm your alarm system, you use your mobile app. If you want to arm your alarm system, you use your mobile app. You want to check your cameras, use your mobile app. You want to open a door, you can use your mobile app. Like that's the thing. In a lot of cases, like the Gallagher security system actually has some kind of cool things. It actually has where you can put a card reader like you would see on your door. Like, so if you swipe at a door at a card reader, they have one inside, but there's no door. But you use your phone at there, and your phone actually becomes the keypad for the alarm system. So you can actually like put a thing in, going and I want to arm the yard, but I want to keep the office disarmed. And this section down here, I want to put into stay alarm so that I can walk around, but I want certain secure areas armed. You can do all that directly from your phone. The old school keypads are a bit clumsy. So they're all still old LCD icon keypads or really small, janky, like they look like old iPod screens, basically, like touchscreen things. And those have limitations because like there's multiple systems where it's like, oh, you can only have one on the bus, things like that. Right now, your phone is the most powerful system that you carry around with you. It's more powerful than the keypad. It can get more information. It can do more things. It's the way to go. As far if you are still having to use PIN numbers, so let's say you have an older system. All right. We want to make sure that your PIN numbers are kept up to date. So we want you to go through to your user list and actually check it with your security company. Make sure that those numbers are being updated. The amount of times I run into a site and I go, all right, here's all your user list and PIN numbers. How many of these people are still here? And they'll go, oh, well, half of those people have actually gone. They don't work here, but their PIN numbers still work. You have to make sure you keep that up to date. The other thing is the PIN number itself. There's certain PIN numbers we want to avoid. So birth years, and don't use your birth year. The amount of systems I see that say like, oh, my number is 1980. Yeah, that's it. Don't do that. All right. The other one is you don't want to use simple things like the 1234 or the 2580, which is a very common Bosch one. Don't use those ones. So make it completely random. Most alarm systems, if they are doing pins, will actually have a button inside the system that'll say create me a randomly generated 4-digit PIN number. The other thing is you want to make sure that the users have the PIN numbers are far enough away from each other. We don't want them close. Some PIN numbers, like systems in particular, will use like a +1 system for like duress and things like that. So we don't want 1980, 1981, 1983. Like, again, we want to kind of spread it out. The only other thing I'll actually say is my preference is for you not to start the PIN number with 0. So let's say you want your PIN number to be 0511, 0769, whatever, right? When you take that and you dump that out of the alarm system in the background, so when we're like saying you want a user list, we're going to make you a user list so you can go through and do an audit. When you dump that into Excel, very commonly, it will try to just remove that front 0. So if you start with a number, 1 through 9, that number comes out clean. But if you start with a 0, the number could be 0, 1, 2, 3, but on the sheet it's going to look like 1, 2, 3 because Excel deletes the 0. So as a rule, don't use 0 to start your PIN number. Yeah. If you do need to use PIN numbers, my suggestion is to go with 6. It's more secure, but most everybody uses 4 because you guys don't really care, right? So that kind of brings me to the last point, which is sharing PIN numbers. I actually put a post up on my socials the other week because we were in a situation where I went to a site and I was talking to them about their PIN numbers and their security. And I went to the keypad and I was like checking out what's going on. And I asked the guy, I'm like, okay, do you guys all share one PIN number? And he goes, yeah, we just have one PIN number. Everybody here shares it. We just arm and disarm it. And I go, okay, and did you write the PIN number on the keypad in permanent marker, like in Sharpie? And he goes, yeah, it's just easier that way. That way we don't have to remember it. So literally anybody, so me even as a technician and like a consultant, I could come in and I was able to arm and disarm their system without trying. And from the control room side and from the reporting side, the system doesn't know the difference of me disarming the system to him disarming the system. So there's no way for me to go, hey, who came in this morning and disarmed the system at what time? I look at the log, I go, we don't know, but it was disarmed at 7 a.m., right? And assuming that they don't have a great camera system, which they don't, at that point in time, there's no way to check that, right? We don't know who did that. So if somebody comes in on a Saturday and disarms the system and empties the store out, and then we come in on Monday and we go, all right, well, whose PIN number was used and when did they come in? We can't start checking that back, right? If I know that John's PIN number was used, then we can go to John and we go, John, your PIN number was used. Are you sharing your PIN number? Isn't like you become a person of interest at that point in time. And from a management point of view, that's way more useful than just it was used by the team PIN number and we kind of don't know who has that. Last bit on that one, if somebody leaves the company and it's not changing because you're using your zip code and you've written it in permanent marker on the keypad, that PIN number is out in the wild. Anybody in the world could have that PIN number. So again, if you have questions on this, reach out to me or my team. Reach out to your own security people. There are answers to getting this stuff fixed. So we can help kind of guide you through that if you want. In a lot of cases, specifically if you have like an access control list or a user list that's kind of just encumbered with old entries, what we would normally do is we'd say, look, we're going to nuke it all. We're going to start from scratch. It's a little bit of labor in collecting everybody's names, number, and getting all their pins or access control set up. But starting from scratch and keeping it that way is 100% better than not knowing who has access to your site. So, yeah. All right. All right, so we'll go into the third question now. So the question is, have I ever caught a burglar? Now, I'm not a police officer, so I've never arrested anybody. I've never had to tackle anybody to the ground. And I'm not really a fighter, as those of you who know. I'm more of like a, hey, let's talk this out kind of guy. So, no, I've never physically arrested anybody. Now, actually, to the point where we have facilitated the capture of people doing illegal things, that's a yes. Now, that's multiple times, which is nice. It's cool to be able to say that. The first story that kind of comes to my head, though, is the very first day that I started working in video monitoring in Australia. So it was the very first job once I got to Australia, because obviously I come from America. I moved here. I went from a very technical field there into security, and it was new for me. So I actually started in a control room down in Melbourne, where at the time, and this is now well over a decade back, but at the time, video monitoring was not common, to the point where we actually wrote our own software that interfaced with Patriot, which is an older version of Patriot, which is a software they use by monitoring centers. So we wrote this software that used the API to connect to it, and then we were able to pull the video stuff out of that and get it into our software to be able to check alarms when they go off. Now, it's super common now. Every control room does it now, but at the time, only really VideoFi did it, and that was a very expensive system. So we were very proud of that system, and it worked incredibly well. Specifically at that time, it worked well. Now, real quick, just as a side note, the next podcast I'm doing, I actually have a guest coming on that's going to be talking about API and how to integrate other systems with your security stuff or the digital environment. So if you are interested in API, check us out next week, because we'll have Zachary in here to kind of have a chat with us about that. But we had that set up. So my very first week I'm there, we have a wonderful human being named Simon, who is basically teaching us and supervising us in the control room. And then me and my friend David, it was our first week we started together. We were there actioning all the alarms kind of under his supervision. So nights can be a bit of a slow period. You get a lot of alarms, but most of them will be just kind of things like wind blowing and stuff like that. A lot of that's been cleaned up now, but specifically back then, you got a lot of false alarms, and you check basically all of them with the video cameras. So roughly around like 2 o'clock in the morning, we get an alarm comes through from a recycling plant that we were monitoring. And David's over on the station next to me, and he goes, I'm going to check this one. I'm like, cool. Yeah, I'll keep an eye out for the next one. And so he brings up the alarm. The alarm comes through with the camera feed, starts the camera feed, and he's like, oh my God, look at this. And I lean over, and Simon comes over, and he looks over, and on the video from the alarm coming through, we see two guys in the ski masks with the holes cut out. They are breaking in through the front door of this office for this plant, this recycling place. They're then going into the back room where they obviously knew where something was. And then they have sledgehammers, and they start going at the safe that's held under the desk with these sledgehammers, trying to get the safe open to get out whatever's inside. We can assume it's money, right? Probably at this point in time. So they're going at it. So David kind of looks over at me and Simon. He's like, what should I do? And Simon, who is at that point the only person whose heart is probably not pounding out of their chest, because keep in mind, me and David are new. And even though we're not physically there on site, when you're seeing something like this happen live and you're knowing that you have to do something about it, your adrenaline starts picking up. It's insane, actually. Like, it's a crazy feeling. So Simon kind of calmly goes, you should probably call the police. So meanwhile, David picks up the phone, and David starts calling the police. Now, with video monitoring, we can call the police directly, because we are visually verifying that there's somebody on site. So we can go to the police and go, hey, there's two guys in hockey masks that are inside this building right now with sledgehammers going at the key safe. And then the police will action that as an actual event. Like, it's not okay, we'll get somebody when we get there. They will actually go to that site to deal with that problem as a priority. So he's calling the police. I'm sitting there watching this video. I probably should be like checking any other alarms that come through, like being a useful human being, but seeing this all happen live was by far the craziest thing that I've ever like witnessed, like actual crime happening, and we're watching it happen. So he gets on the phone with the police and he starts giving them the information, and these guys are still trying to get into the safe with the sledgehammers, and they're not really having a ton of luck. And then all of a sudden you see them start like looking around and kind of panicking. And then because obviously we have more than one camera there, what we can see is the police actually show up and start chasing them through the building. So David's on the phone with the police and he's like, it looks like you guys are there already. And the lady from the call center is like, no, I haven't even like finished putting the information in. And David's like, well, I'm watching the police officers chase these guys. So the police officers chase the guys through, actually collect both of them and arrest both of them right then and there. We called the after hours, the owner of the building. He actually went down there and met the police, all that kind of stuff. And the police took them away. It's like an open and cut case of, they broke in, set off the alarm. We called the police. The police showed up, arrested them, and they went to jail. Now, the funny thing about this is the police were already there. So even though we were calling the police to set them up, what we found out later was the police were actually parked in their car across the street. These guys that were breaking in didn't realize they were there. So when they broke in, they set off all the sirens and strobes. The police officers just kind of naturally went in on their own to do their job, which they did amazingly. But from a control room point of view, like obviously this is a company that I don't work with anymore, but that was very much like it was a win, right? So we went through and like that footage was kind of like with the permission of the owner and everything. It was used like, I think they did like I don't remember what the version of Dateline is here in Australia, but like Current Affair, I think it is. But they did like a whole special on like, a segment being like, oh look, video monitoring's great, it catches criminals. Now, over time and over years, there has been not as many of those that are that easy. We have had multiple people where we've been able to call the police show up, do a great job, and take care of the issues like that, which is wonderful. Video monitoring is actually, compared to old school monitoring, which I talked about this in episode 1 if you're interested, it's far more effective. It's still not perfect, right? There's still a human element to it, and we're looking at cameras in the middle of the night and trying to decipher, is this a person? Is this maybe just a shadow moving? Specifically yard alarms, where there's a ton of false alarms. We're trying to decipher what's real, what's not. So there is a lot of human element to it, but it is so much more effective than old school monitoring, where it would be like, you can't see anything, send a patrol, wake people up at 2 o'clock in the morning, see if it wasn't effective. It was more of a safe feeling knowing you had monitoring, whereas now we're actually dealing with active deterrent, both through hardware, so like your cameras and your sirens and your strobes on your alarm system, and the video monitoring where people can actually action stuff. So instead of you having to have a guard on site, you have guards remotely watching your site through event-driven stuff. So the answer is yeah. We catch criminals on occasion. We would always love to catch more. We can't catch them all. But the ability to actually cause some sort of positive effect there is good. It's actually one of the things I like most about what we do. All right. Well, that is all 3 of the questions for today. I think I'm going to hit roughly around 25 minutes, which is pretty solid. My first one was only 12. So that's pretty good. So if you have any questions about today's stuff, feel free to yell out. I'm always around. I'm easy to find on all the social medias, everything. So send me any questions you have, anything that you're trying to figure out yourself. If it's questions about specifically what we talked about today, we should be able to get you answers very quickly. If it is questions you want to add to the list of things that we answer in future episodes, that is also okay. That's how we get our questions, is by people actually asking the questions. So don't be a stranger. Make sure you kind of subscribe and share if it's something you find interesting. And we will talk soon. You have a very good day.